Okay, good afternoon. Is this working? Yes. Thank you for being here. I've been told I should start. My name is Tania Katzschner. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a lecturer in City and Regional Planning in the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. I'm also a student or researcher in the environmental humanities, and I want to speak to you about a building care initiative. Very new, we started it last year, and in the context of the theme of this conference, it was hard not to feel pulled to try share about our building care initiative. So, prompted by the Must For movements, which burst onto the scene in 2015, and with the struggle for what must emerge continuing, our City and Regional Planning Department recognized the importance of building support, collective solidarity, and prioritizing well-being and care among staff, and that's all staff, past and academic, and students. So from last year, as I said, it's quite new, in 2017, our planning department staff, together with our planning students, we started what we've named the Building Care Initiative. And the idea is to nurture and literally grow care. A key question that drives our initiative is how to grow more warmth, more care, more attention to self and to other. Our initiative, it risks slowing down to nurture profound levels of observation and conversation, we think, to protect capabilities for flourishing. And I just had to add this image, which I only recently noticed in my own neighborhood. Slow down, it's Cape Town. So the intention is to build a network of solidarity, of trust and care, and to learn how to become more socially responsive and life-supporting in our practices. We believe strongly that transformation and change is about a different way of being together. The invitation is to radically participate and to work with more depth and more breadth. Attitudes that we value in our learning environment and community are cooperation, consideration, humility, generosity, and compassion. We encourage mutual respect and listening. So we're still growing and developing this initiative and what it could be and what it would mean in our microcosm, in our own program. We're seeding all sorts of ideas and little gestures and initiatives together with our students, and it's all about building a more healthy commons. We're hoping that over time such an initiative could be amplified. As part of our Building Care initiative, we host a monthly seminar really recognizing the significance of inquiry and engagement and creating a space for dialogue for difficult issues. We invite speakers to inspire and enliven us and our intentions. So far, this space has proved to be quite an important open space for dialogue outside the constraints of a classroom and the pressures of an academic course where there's assessment, and also enables to invite all our staff in. So my very short input this afternoon, I want to reflect on the initiative, share some of the learnings, but also more importantly, I want to share some of the questions that I'm currently wrestling with. So at the end, I'm going to put up some of my own questions, but of course you can ask me any questions that you have, but I'd love you to help me with my questions. So I would say that we're currently situated in a space between stories or between flats. This moment poses challenges for which we don't have or we don't possess effective knowledge nor adequate practice. We in a context, in a time of interruption and discontinuity, and we really are called upon to pause, to hesitate, to search for new possibilities. So the Building Care initiative wrestles with how to explore gaps between spaces. How can we give space to the story we're not hearing, but we're feeling? The Building Care initiative, it's an attempt at a transformative engagement for our current, I would say, suspended times and space between stories, where there are new forms of solidarity forming around well-being, learning, and knowing. I take this initiative as just one example of the possibility and promise of a new culture and practice for a deeper sense of connection, obligation, and responsibility. It's much easier to demand ethical behavior and caring from our institution than it is to demonstrate it in our own microcosm and department. So the Building Care initiative, it's vulnerable, it's pioneering, and it's contested. It falls in between the cracks of our institutional boundaries and mandates. It's outside our curricula, it's outside my core responsibilities. It relies on a lot of gift work. So we're attempting to weave different relationship with staff and students and our context. We're trying to engage the mess of our own everyday reality and trying to allow for a different experience of our environment. So the intention is for a new kind of attention and practice of seeing and engaging with our context. So different ways of being together are called for, and one could call that an ordinary, everyday magic, enlivening simply the ordinary magic. And that perhaps is where a shift could lie, in the quality of an approach rather than a different thing being done. I'm sure many of you know this book, Small is Beautiful, by Schumacher. So also the Building Care initiative, it aims for a new kind of noticing, initiating space for slowing down and finding ways to reanimate the small and to bring enchantment back. Here's one quote I'd love to read by the author. Many of you might know the book, Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She says, ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. Not given to us to know which act or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. So I've read this quote because I think it's really significant to focus on the small scale. And we need to learn new habits. So in small groups, in our own little microcosm of just the city and regional planning department, we can perhaps grow enough intimacy and trust. Liz spoke this morning about how in Buenos Aires they're all psychotherapists, so perhaps together we can become co-therapists. We practice talking about our feelings and we learn from each other's experiences. We remind each other to be careful with ourselves and with others. In our little groups, we can practice showing up, messing up, and forgiving each other and going on together. So in a sense, because it's new and pioneering and different and outside the curricula, it's free to play and we're free to try new things without having to deploy them to the whole course or the whole degree, the whole department, the whole university. So we're open to learning from the beginning. We don't get crushed by the burden or the delusion perhaps of the task to fix the whole university or the whole department. We simply want to animate a different force by being more open and flexible in our practices. The initiative is not about offering solutions. It's about offering a platform for discussion with deep intention. There's no givenness certainties, and that perhaps enables a release of insistence. Many writers acknowledge that not knowing creates space, and that from a place of question, the world gets bigger. So the initiative tries to work with a respect of the uncertain and a commitment to awaken a larger reality. Can we find a way to live alongside the uncertain and build a politics of process where the only certainty is doing what is right and what feels right at the right time? Can we embed a cycle of reflection and learning? can we enliven a process of being thoughtful, of being present and paying attention? So I like the emphasis on being present this morning. So the hope is for this initiative to create space for learning together, unlearning, reflecting, and becoming. It takes quite a lot of courage to move from wanting to resolve and solve things to adopting a stance of acknowledging what is present without fixing it, just to be with what is. Often that simply allows a flow of energy again for our microcosm or our department. I've taken this image from, many of you might know Donna Haraway, a very well-known feminist. She used this image at a commencement address last month. Cat's Cradle, I think it's a very helpful image. It's a game played on many hands with many digits, inheriting and inventing patterns, receiving them, passing them on, dropping threads, picking them up. So it's all about staying with the trouble and the joy of playing and caring. And perhaps that can cultivate responsibility, of figuring out collectively. Are your eyes nicely open? This is a phrase that I learned in this book by Paul Mayberg. Are your eyes nicely open is a Bushman's morning greeting. It's more than a greeting. It's a qualitative question asked of the other. The deeper question of are your eyes nicely open is around having come to full wakefulness. So that saying, that greeting feels apt to reach for a certain attitude and disposition to the world of patient attention and allowing what we perceive to surprise and challenge our understanding. Such openness, I suggest, doesn't happen on its own. We need to practice it. So the hope is that the Building Care initiative facilitates spaces for people to come together to explore what matters most to them, learning their way into what it means to be a learning community. My hope would be that this initiative inspires hope through a practice of being aware and awake to the world. Not about imposing knowledge, but about generating knowledge, fueling collaboration and collective impact. So perhaps while seeking to change the world, we're open to being changed by the world, and also engaging multiple sensibilities, our heads, our hearts, our perception, intuition, feeling, and imagination. So, in conclusion, my best hope is for such an initiative to be considered a horizontal decolonizing process. It starts with people's knowledge and care as a process of disruptive healing. It rearranges existing patterns and actively tries to engage some of our current struggles and challenges. It's a space that creates openness and space for dialogue, space of coming together, creating solidarity, connection, care. So perhaps such practices can give space to subtle dimensions of our historical woundedness. So that's really all I want to share so far about the initiative. But more important, I said I'd love to share some of my own questions that I'm wrestling with. And maybe I'll explain them a little more than just to show them up there. I said I shared the African proverb that we needing to slow down. So how do we slow down in a context where there's so much urgency? There are many ironies and contradictions, so the inside-outside. So this Building Care initiative is kind of an add-on. It's outside the curricula. It's outside a course. And that comes with many pros and cons and contradictions. One of them, how do you make it sustainable? Currently it relies on gift work, and I'm very fast realizing also the throughput of students. It's so quick. So I started it last year. Those students are already gone. So how do you make it sustainable? And how do I deal with colleagues' views? There are many colleagues that are of the view that they're not social workers. This is in the realm of social work. In fact, it would be downright irresponsible to engage in such work. It's outside their expertise. So, that is my core business would be to focus on my discipline. Yeah, what do you think students and staff would gain from such an experience? Why do people care, not care, and is it important? And then, of course, my biggest hope would be to amplify such an initiative, and how can it be amplified? So thank you very much.
Does anyone want to try and answer?
Thanks, a very exciting presentation, and I'm delighted to be following you. The one question is, there's a growing slow movement that is really interesting and coming into all disciplines. And I think it would be interesting to bring the building sciences into it. I know they're geographers. And then the attention to care. People are saying that the ethics of care is actually an ethical imperative for all disciplines, not just for the healers. So we'll chat afterwards. Thanks.
Love to, thank you.
Does anyone else?
Thanks, Tanya. Lovely to hear your reflections, and amazing to kind of get a glimpse of where you're coming from. I suspect there's a lot more beneath that. So I just wanted to ask, in your work, it sounds as though you've been staff and students involved in this, and you're saying, well, some people are questioning it. So I'd love to know, like, the students, have they appreciated it and seen this as something that a university should do? And so therefore when, your colleagues say, well, this is not your role, it's like, well, how is it not your role to rethink, which is part of what you've been arguing. So could you maybe reflect a bit on the students' perception of how they've valued this or how they've embraced it?
Thanks, Gina. That's a really helpful question that also helps me expand more. So I have to say up front, there's none of my immediate planning colleagues, no one's questioning this at all. The questioning around social work is also from dialogue around UCT, also outside my faculty. I've come across this position a few times, that this kind of thing, that we can't be social workers, this is for. In terms of the students' experience, that connects to my question around the sustainability of it all. Because it's outside the course, outside assessment, in a very dense, intense master's course where students battle to make time for anything additional, attendance is often terribly disappointing. So, I have, there could be up to 50, 60 people attending. It's honors students, master's students, all the staff, the librarian, the clean, many people could be attending, and sometimes there's really poor turnout, which is disappointing because a lot of effort goes into, we've had some really extraordinary speakers. Yet it's always amazing, even if 5 people show up. But that connects to my question of, and when all the students that come always thank me for it, find it incredibly meaningful and valuable. But students battle to show up when they're under so much pressure to produce things for marks. So that's one of the things I'm wrestling with. Yet it allows such a fabulous freedom, not being in that we all just human beings in there. I'm not assessing them. Our support staff, anyone can participate. It creates a freedom. But then it comes with those downfalls.
Adding onto the theme of what you're raising and what you're speaking about, but what happens to a society when we outsource care to a very, very, very small burden profession that barely exists. We can't afford to outsource care. It must be the center of what we're about. And I think it speaks to how we are becoming so focused on productivity and throughput and getting students through and managing money. And so I think the discussions around slow movements and reflection and rebuilding those relationships in a space where we are between stories and we are needing to rebuild relationships is important.
Thank you, Sarah. That at times I've thought, well, there's no way you can legislate care. So this, I think that takes one to the dilemma, because everything that we do, it's, there are policies for it, but this kind of falls in between, and it needs to be reclaimed. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you perhaps give an example of an activity that you do with the students that embodies some of these principles? Thank you.
Thank you. So I've spoken a little bit about, we have monthly seminars where I've been inviting guests, so anyone from our own faculty, counselor who shares tools for better self-care, to a student activist, to talking about becoming a professional, to inviting someone in practice in our profession and asking them to engage, challenging topics, things like that. We've had some really phenomenal speakers engage us. But in addition to that, I'm also really trying to seed everyday gestures, and that part worked extraordinarily well last year. So existing in that very vulnerable space, always anticipating perhaps shut down, and just helping the students become more aware of each other. So to understand where everyone lives, who's got access to transport, who's got access to Wi-Fi, who's got a home that when in your residence you can't work, so like just to almost have a database of each other. And that was magical last year. When there was just that 1 or 2 day shutdown, students were so gentle and mindful with each other and taking care of each other, lifting each other, organizing a lecture venue. So I had to do nothing. Just that was amazing, making sure everyone has food, has transport, has what they need. That was really amazing to see how that was self-sustaining. You just generate, kind of seed the idea, and then students self-organize.
Thanks. I was intrigued at your reference to Schumacher and Small is Beautiful, and I was wondering to what extent you could bridge into the curriculum and not be on the outside in the context of this tendency to try and massify higher education, massify throughput, and then on the societal side, the financialization and commodification of everything. And to what extent your research projects or project-based learning in your curriculum could be topics generated by the students that look at the contradictions between slow, between small massification, between commodification and social care personalization, and turn them into actual projects and research initiatives as part of the curriculum. Is there space for that kind of exploration so that what is in your group actually gets brought in by them?
Thank you. I'd like to think about that more deeply. I think in a baby steps way, there are little seeds where I bring that in, but I think I could do it in a much more deeper and meaningful way. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to rather than having people coming in to give presentations, rather do student-generated projects. On Tony's Emerge Africa festival that's on at the moment, he had Nancy White in a workshop last week, and she made a really poignant comment. And she said, if there's content to be delivered to students, give them a URL. Don't stand there offering them content. So if you could possibly transfer some curriculum space-time into an activity that brings in the wonderful stuff that you're doing, and squeeze content into another space, maybe that could help.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Round of applause one more time. Such a great presentation. Love to talk.